Hello. In this video, we're going to go over how to put the displays into a suspend or sleep mode. So this mode is very useful on the display. So normally when you're booting a display from a completely off state, it will take between 10 to 18 seconds depending on your application size and other factors to boot from an off state to a working application. So this can be a little long for some customers that want or need a very quick boot process. So suspend mode allows you to boot the display normally from a suspend state to completely on in 1 to 2 seconds. The negative of suspend mode, so if you think of it like your laptop, obviously when you turn your laptop completely off, your computer, to boot it back up usually takes about the same amount of time, maybe 20 or so seconds. But if you just suspend it or close the lid of the laptop and then open it back up, it takes just a couple seconds, so a lot quicker. So the displays have that sort of suspend mode. The negative to it though is that they draw a bit more power in suspend mode. I would recommend, the power consumption is going to depend a bit on the I/O and things that you're using. So I would recommend that you test this yourself to determine the power the display is drawing in suspend mode and how much time that's acceptable for your specific application. But we'll go over how to set the display into suspend mode and some of the options that we can select for this mode. Okay, we're gonna first come and log into the display here with Putty. So if you don't know Putty or don't know how to log into the displays, please see the other videos. So my display is IP address 192.168.0.2. Gonna expand this out a bit. So log it in with root and SUSE root. So in this video, I'm using a VA display, and that brings me to another important point. Two of our displays in our lineup don't have suspend mode available, and those are the XA and XS displays. So those will not have suspend mode. Every other display, the VC, VA, XM displays, all have suspend mode available. But if you're using an XA or XS, then we don't currently have that. In the next hardware update of those displays, we'll bring in suspend mode. Okay, so here you can see I'm logged into the display. And what we're going to do is we're going to use something we've used in previous videos called the CC Settings Console, which gives you access to some of the CC aux or hardware of the display through the Linux command line. So we're going to type in CC Settings Console, and I tabbed over to autocomplete. And in this case, just so we can see all the options, I'm going to say --list. And here it lists out all of the options that we have for the CC Settings Console. So in this case, I know what I'm looking for, but if you don't or you're not familiar with CC Settings Console, I would recommend you look over the list because there's a decent amount you can do just from the Linux terminal. But I'm looking for this on-off here. And what we're going to do is specifically look down here to OnOff Signal, which is, in this case, the key switch. So the on-off signal is the key switch, and you can see it's you can set it to no action, suspend, or shut down. So by default, it's likely, well, it is set to shut down. So when the displays arrive from our factory, they're set at shutdown. I'm not sure if I've already changed this display I'm working on, but we can check by just following this example here. So we're going to type it again, CC settings console, but now say on off. So we're following this line here, and then dash dash on off signal. So dash dash on off underscore signal. And you can see ours is set to suspend already because I've already set this, but you know, if I wanted to change it, I'm going to follow here and say on off signal equals shutdown, for instance. And it tells me the signal is set to shutdown. So now if I were to read that again, I would see the on-off signal action is shut down. So now if I were to pull power on my key switch, it would shut down the display. And again, shutdown's the default. So if I wanted to now change it from the default, I would, instead of saying equals shutdown, I would come up here and say equals suspend. All right, and now I see on-off signal set to suspend. So on the XA and XS, which does not support shut or suspend, as I mentioned before, you, I believe, will still see this option, but if you try to suspend it, it will just tell you it can't do it. So now we can confirm that the setting took place. So, you know, as of this point, we have on-off signal action suspend. So now when we pull power on our key switch, the display will move into suspend mode. So we could do this again for different ways that the display is shut down, for instance. So on the VA, I mean, the most logical way is through the key switch, but you can also do it so it's if you press the top left button on the display, it will shut down or suspend. And I believe that's done through this trigger and short press action here. So if you were to say short press suspend, then the top left button would suspend it. Long press, you would have to hold the button. But like I said, the most used option by customers is this on-off signal action here. All right, so let's go over a couple other useful things that you might want to combine. So the on-off signal time, this is the time between when the display receives the on or the off signal to when it actually moves into suspend. And you can see this is length in seconds. Okay, so in this case, we can find our current time, and I believe it should be 4, which is the default 4 seconds. So on-off signal underscore time. So yep, it's set to 4 seconds. So what this means is when the display, when your key switch value goes low or off, the display will wait 4 seconds before it moves into suspend mode. We could increase this or decrease it if we wanted, just by, again, you know, setting that time equal to 10 seconds, for instance. And it'll tell you it's set to 10 seconds. So this is helpful if you don't want it to immediately go into suspend, or if the operator is going to turn off the key switch and then quickly turn it back on. You might want to wait a little while before you actually move the display into suspend mode. You could also set it to 0 and it'll move in immediately. So I'm going to turn this back to 4 though. All right, the last thing I'll cover is this, where is it? There's a Suspend Max Time. So this is also pretty helpful. So as I mentioned, the displays in suspend mode do draw slightly more power than they do in a completely off state. So this is helpful because you can set the max time the display will be in suspend before it turns off completely. So let's look at what this is set to right now. On, off, suspend max time. So right now it's set to 60 minutes. Okay, so this means that after it's put into suspend mode, so when the key switch goes low, it goes into suspend mode, and it will wait in suspend mode for 60 minutes. And if it's not turned back on within that time, it's going to shut down completely. So this is sort of like a power saving mode. So, you know, let's say in an example that your operators, the machine's being used within a 24-hour period most of the time, but after 24 hours, you are worried that the battery will drain out if it just stays in suspend for a week or even a weekend. So you can instead set this time to be 24 hours. So after 24 hours of being in suspend, the display would shut down. That way it's not drawing extra battery. So 60 minutes times 24 would give us 1440, or 1,400 minutes. So we could do the same thing in 1,440. And, you know, again, we could read that. So this one, when I have it set like this, it's going to stay in suspend mode for 24 hours. And if the display isn't turned on back in that time through the key switch coming back on, then it will completely shut down the display. So I would say those three commands are pretty useful. So this is how you would go in and set it manually. So keep in mind that what we're doing here in the Linux terminal is an interface to our CC aux libraries and hardware interfaces on the display. So just to kind of demonstrate this, so what we did here is set it manually, but you don't need to set it manually every time. It would make no sense if you're going into production with any large volume of displays. You wouldn't want to go into every display and do this every single time. So depending on your application development, there's a couple different options. The easiest one, if you're using Qt or C++ application development, you can, I'm on our support site here, support.crosscontrol.com. We talked about this in pretty much all the videos. Hopefully if you're watching this video, you've probably got to this site. So if we look in the VA display, I've opened display computers and then VA, and I come to manuals and look at CC aux. So what we just did is, you know, like I said, a terminal interface to our CC aux. So the file, in this case with the functions for CC aux, is this config.h file. So the config.h file includes a lot of different functions to do different things, and only some of those functions were included in the CC settings console. But if I look here, this config set OnOff Signal action is the function that we used in CC settings console to set the trigger mode to suspend. So in your Qt, C++ application, any application with an interface to our CC aux libraries will have this function available, so you can just simply set these different, like set up suspend mode and the max suspend time all within your application. So you don't need to manually go in and configure a display every time. If you're using Code Assist, I don't believe this particular function is included in the CC aux libraries for Code Assist. So in that case, we would have to do something slightly different, and we would instead use the use scripts to configure the display every time at startup, and then copy those scripts over with your application during production. So you can achieve essentially exactly the same thing as you can with C++ and Qt, but you would set it up with scripts. So I have a separate video on configuring the display with scripts during boot up, and I've covered some of these things in that video as far as using the ccaux functions and other command line functions. So please go check out that video. But in this one, we talked about how to do it manually and looked at where these are in our ccaux documentation. Thanks for watching.